Well, at ease, paratroopers. If you like that reference from HBO's hit series, Band of Brothers, you're going to like this podcast. My name is Kevin Kidder, and after 20 years in the Army, I discovered something unexpected. The toughest battles were behind me, they were just different. This is the Enduring Mindset podcast. Here in our inaugural season, The Invisible Veteran, we'll explore what it takes to reclaim purpose, rebuild identity, and restore connection after service. This podcast isn't just for veterans, it's for anyone navigating transition leaders, spouses, teammates, anyone asking, who am I now and what comes next? Each week, I'll share lessons from my journey, stories from others who've walked similar paths, and tools to help you build what I call an enduring mindset, one forged through adversity, guided by purpose, and grounded in service to others. Before we dive in, I just want to thank you for being here. I know there are literally thousands of other things you could be listening to, and the fact you chose this podcast means a lot. My hope is that you walk away each week with something useful, a story, a reminder, or even just a little encouragement. This week's guest is former Army Staff Sergeant and current construction consultant Justin Clark. Justin and I have been friends and brothers for 16 years. We trained for and deployed together to Afghanistan in 2010. Since getting out, Justin has a beautiful family, has found his niche, bringing the same pride, enthusiasm, and humor that made him so beloved in uniform. In this conversation, we peel back the layers of finding your place in the real world and also explore the human side associated with the difficulty in transitioning from the military and the intentionality and hard work it takes to reclaim your identity. Here's my conversation with Justin Clark. Bro, welcome to the podcast. It's so good to have you here.
I am really excited and a little nervous, but it'll be fun, dude. I'm excited.
No reason to be nervous. So my format for introducing guests at this point is to explain how we met, paint a mental image for the listener, and then finally share a story that embodies our relationship. Sound good? All right. So we met 16 years ago at Fort Campbell, right before my daughter was born. You instantly struck me as professional yet hilarious. You were obviously very fit. You're extremely competent in and proud of your job as a medic. You took the mission serious, but you didn't take yourself too serious. You could find the humor in any situation, and you often used your humor to de escalate or diffuse those intense situations or conversations. And, I was drawn to you immediately, and I feel like we became fast friends.
100%. Yeah.
Okay, listener, for the mental image, if Chris Hemsworth as Thor and Brad Pitt from Fight Club had a baby, it would be Justin. He is ridiculously good looking. I think of Emma Stone from as Hannah in Crazy Stupid Love when Ryan Gosling takes his shirt off and she's like, oh, fuck, it's like you're photoshopped. And additionally, again, you have a great sense of humor, well placed, well timed sarcasm, and an obvious distaste for toxic authority, and a really unique ability to see the world in a different way.
Well, I did. That's way more credit than needed. I'm more like Thor after when it's which one is the Avengers when he turns into Fat Thor? I kind of feel more like that lately.
An Endgame.
Yeah.
All right.
I
So my
appreciate that.
story. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that was awesome. It made me feel good.
Good. So I had a hard time picking a story. I was like, should we do one of our epic beer pong championships at Campbell? Should it be your scuba diving adventures at the golf course here in Arizona? And then I was like, no, this just happened a couple weeks ago. You were sending each other reels on Instagram like we do. And one of them was Dan Soder doing the Macho Man Randy Savage voice. And you responded, you're like, I'm in Seattle for work. I'm a little tipsy and I'm working on my Macho Man impression. And you do voices so well. And you sent me this voice message on Instagram. I'm going to play it. And here we go.
Okay, now check it out there, old kidder boy. I'm gonna get in my undies and you're gonna go watch a video of it real quick, you see. Oh, yeah.
So I'm in my recliner. Caitlin's on the couch. And I have tears streaming down my face. I'm laughing. And I look over at Caitlin and she just has this feigned look of disgust on her voice. And, she's rolling her eyes. She's like, what is going on? And I'm like, dude, that's us. We just have so much fun together no matter what we're doing. And then it's an absolute bonus if we can embarrass our wives and our kids at the same time.
Yeah, 100%. If you're not getting that look from your wife like once a week, you're doing something wrong.
Right. And I'm, lucky for
Yeah.
us, our wives get it 2-3 times a day.
Yeah, 100%.
So earlier in April, I was at a conference in LA, and one of the breakout sessions was hosted by Brett Ledbetter, who's a mental performance coach, and it was asking better questions. And that was the one I chose, and phenomenal session. And at the end, he plugs his new book, which is 365 Questions Getting to Know Yourself and Your Team Better. And I knew when I started the podcast, I wanted to take his recommendation and make it my own, which is whenever I have a guest, I'm going to have them pick a number between 1 and 365, read them the question that appears on that page for the first time during the podcast. So we get a real unscripted, authentic answer. So here we go. You ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so your question is actually two parts. So part one is, when was the angriest you have felt in your life?
So that was more of a recent thing. And I don't get angry very often. And it was an argument between my wife and I. And I think I told you about this story. This was probably a year ago. And my wife and I have a fantastic marriage, especially 14 years in. It gets better and better, which is always what you want. But I accidentally overheard a conversation that she was having with her sister. And she had said something about me that kind of hurt my feelings. Um, and to her credit, it's one of those things that you say to somebody, not because you don't like the person, but you say it because you don't think they're going to hear it, right? We've all said that about people we love, but I approached her about it. I said, it really hurt my feelings that you said this. And what I was expecting to hear was, I'm so sorry you heard that. And I'm so sorry it hurt your feelings. I feel terrible. That's what I was expecting to hear going into this situation. And I didn't hear that. I heard, why were you eavesdropping? And, we had this big blow up and it turned into this thing where I said, that was the maddest I ever got. And it boiled down to was, you're my best friend and you're supposed to care when you hurt my feelings. And it didn't feel like you cared. So that was the maddest I ever got, was not getting what I expected to get, which was partially my fault because I went into it expecting to hear something and not getting it. So that was definitely my fault of that whole situation.
I think that's a great point. A lot of times anger is based on what we expect to have happen. We have premonitions in our head of how things are going to go or happen. And when they don't, anger and embarrassment are very close emotions. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. And then again, I said it was two parts. So the follow up, or part two, have you learned to make peace with anger? Why or why not?
And I mean, yeah, I'm not an angry person. Like, I mean, you said in the intro that I usually make light of any situation I'm in because it's way more fun to be happy than be angry. So, but yeah, it is, when it comes to that specific instance, yeah, we've worked through that obviously, and everything's fantastic. I don't ever even think about that situation anymore ever. So, talking through things is hugely important, which I'm sure we'll probably get into that later on in the podcast as well.
Yeah. Before we hit record, I don't like your question, because I was like, he's not an angry dude. Like if I had asked this question to Kay, we'd probably still be recording.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe it's almost more special that way because, I don't know. I mean, you remember basic training. There was like 6 drill sergeants and every one of them yelled except for one guy. He wasn't a yeller.
Yeah.
But when he did yell, it was so scary because you're like, this guy doesn't yell.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you must have really done something wrong when he got pissed. So maybe it's the same thing as maybe my anger is more impactful because it's such a rarity. I don't know.
Yeah, and that that reminds me of was it Sergeant Major of the Army Daily? He put out like his top 10 leadership lessons before he retired, and one of them was like, if you're always yelling, it's ineffective. Something along the line, that nature, and that totally makes sense to what you're saying.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, so let's talk about you. You had an atypical childhood, and then you ended up enlisting in the military. Would you mind sharing what life was like growing up and how you made the decision to join?
Yeah, man. So I was born in Dallas, Texas, 1984 to a 20-year-old single mom who, God bless her, she didn't listen to a lot of people around her telling her at the time that she should get an abortion because she was a single 20-year-old mom. I mean, that's kind of the what a lot of people do nowadays, but she didn't do it. And she had me and chose the more difficult route. But God bless her, she did her best and did a really good job with me. And then she ended up meeting my stepdad and marrying him when I was 6. So up until then, I didn't really have any father figure, so to speak, up except for my grandfather. He was really the only father figure I had for those first formative years. But he was a super awesome dude that, he's still a role model to me, even though he passed away, but still look up to that guy. But yeah, I grew up in North Texas in this really small town. Only like 694 people lived there at least when I left for the Army. Didn't even have a traffic light until after I joined the military. So yeah, it was a great, dude, it was such a great spot to like be a young boy run around on 10 acres with horses and chickens and just, nothing to hold you back. But yeah, I mean, it was pretty awesome childhood, not going to lie. But, there was this one morning when I was 17, I woke up and walked out to the living room and to go eat some cereal or whatever. And I go to turn on the TV. Do you remember how TVs, they don't do it anymore, but you remember back TVs back in like the late 90s, early 2000, or even before, you'd turn the power on and the picture would slowly like warm up
Yeah.
and like come into frame. So of course it was one of those old TVs. So I turn the TV on and this picture starts slowly coming into view, and it's a view of the World Trade Center towers, and they're both smoking.
Mm.
And I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, I don't remember this in history class. What's happening? I thought it was like, I thought the channel was on the History Channel or something. And, it turns out it was CNN because it was on the night before. And it was September 11th so that was probably 70% of the reason I ended up wanting to join the military was, I was a young Southern boy who loved his country and wanted to go kill bad guys and get revenge for what they did to us, and of course I believed everything that my government told me about it, that, bin Laden hates our freedom. So darn it, I'm going to go get my revenge on him for not liking my freedom.
I didn't know that. We've known each other a long time. I never knew that was a big catalyst for you joining up. That's awesome.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that was definitely a big deal. I'm sure. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people my age have that same deal as a catalyst for them. But then, probably the rest of the reason why I joined was, I remember one Sunday in church, some guy came up to give his testimony, and this dude he was an older guy, but he had this crazy life. Like, he was telling me about, like, explaining like how he was on the wrong tracks, but I wasn't enthralled with all the debauchery. I was enthralled with just the stories that this guy had.
Yeah.
And I was just sitting there thinking, again, I'm only 17, so it's not my fault I don't have a lot of stories in my life. But I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, I live in this tiny town where 95% of the people who live there, they were born there and they're going to die there. And I'm never going to have any cool stories to tell any of my grandkids. I'm just going to, it's going to be this podunk nothing of a life. I was like, if I don't do something, I'm not going to have a cool life or a cool story. And so that was definitely the other part that made me want to join the military and get some good stories in my life,
Dude, that's
which
so
kind of worked
cool.
out.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I love that. So you enlisted, and you enlisted as a 68 whiskey. You were a medic the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So being a medic is definitely a unique role. You're expected to perform under extreme pressure. How did that responsibility shape you?
Man, I really like being a medic. I took my role very seriously. You know, the fact that more than likely I was one of the main reasons that somebody either goes home alive or in a box was not something I ever took lightly. Used to, I specifically, had, deadlift days and squat days just so that I could be prepared to pick somebody like K up if I had to, right? I mean, the listeners don't know what K looks like, but you explained that he's a very large man. So, I took it very seriously that I had to be able to get one of those guys out, because I knew that if something happened and I couldn't get somebody out, that would haunt me forever. And I never wanted that, for myself or for anyone else. But yeah, I always took it very seriously, and I always had a little bit of an issue when, you know, a lot of medics, no offense against them, but a lot of them don't lift weights.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them are smaller dudes. I've seen a lot of medics, 165-pound dudes. And, in Fort Campbell, we had female medics, which, again, as capable as they were, I don't think on their best day they could lift a 200-pound guy and carry him to safety. And I just remember thinking, I was like, man, I don't know if I could go into it. I don't know if I could do that with those kind of limitations, like, cause I'd be so afraid that what if I can't do it? So, yeah, man, I always took being a medic very seriously.
I love that because I always saw you at the gym. You were always there for PT. Great attitude. I loved when our sections would do PT together because we knew it was going to be fun.
Mm,
We'd get
yeah.
creative. Intrinsically, you might have known maybe that internal fear of not being strong enough, but I don't think we ever verbalized that. Maybe we knew it in our brains, especially those of us that had already been downrange once or twice.
Right.
But I wish leadership and even us, I mean, we were leaders, it falls on us too, to share that sentiment with the younger population.
Yeah.
It's not
Well,
PT for PT's sake. And I love how you explained it, that you had a moral obligation to be able to carry anyone off the battlefield.
yeah. Yeah. I thought of it as I took this job, and by taking this job, I have made a promise that I'm there to do what needs to be done. And if I can't do that, then that's my failure.
Right.
Yeah.
What a great sentiment. How many years did you do?
10 years, 10
10
years, man.
years. So in 10 years, you went downrange 3 times. You did one trip to Iraq and 2 to Afghanistan, right?
Right.
So a third of your military career was spent in harm's way. That is not common. I did 3 over 20. What did you learn about yourself, about brotherhood, camaraderie? What lessons overall did you learn from being deployed in combat zones 3 times?
That's a great question. I would say that, you learn a lot about yourself, both physically and mentally. You kind of really learn a lot about what you're capable of and what your limits are. I've kind of always been the person that I've always valued my friendships kind of more than like my extended family, my cousins and my aunts and uncles and stuff. I've always preferred my brotherhood over that, because it's, those are the guys that they have no obligation to you, but they're choosing to, be there with you. I mean, obviously, in the military, you're in a platoon, so those guys kind of have to be there, but they also volunteered to be there. So it's kind of they did choose to be there. So that's kind of what I learned, is just the level of friendship that you develop on a deployment is something that I don't know if it can really be replicated anywhere else in the civilian sector anyways. Unfortunately, because it's something that I wish everyone could experience, but at the same time, I'm almost glad not everybody can experience it, because it's special.
Absolutely. My biological families on my mom's side, I met my cousins once growing up. Both of them, ironically enough, were both in the Army. And I was stationed at 2 duty stations with one of my cousins twice. And I didn't even know. On my dad's side, I knew my cousins a little bit, but not well, just because we lived on the East Coast and they all lived in California. And then growing up, my family was my stepmom's family. and I was always close to them. But once you join the military, you have a whole new life, and you whether it's trauma bonding, it's experiences that you can't get anywhere else. You really are closer to those people, or the relationships mean more, at least in my experience, than almost familial ties at some point.
Yeah, 100%.
And I agree. Like, you learn a lot about yourself emotionally, mentally when you're downrange. How do you deal
Yeah,
with
you get
loneliness? How do you deal with longing for home? How do you deal with fear? How do you deal with things that go your way? I'm a self sabotager. Oh man, I've stepped on it more times than I can count. And a pattern of self sabotage is evident throughout my entire life, and especially my military career. So it's funny.
well, and with the whole deployment thing too. I was lucky enough that two of my deployments were I was single. I didn't have a family, a wife and kids back home to worry about, or to take up space in my mind like you and geez, 90% everybody else who deploys. So in that way, I was kind of lucky because I didn't have any of that cluttering my head. It was kind of all I was, more or less didn't really have, and this may sound morbid, but I didn't really have anything to live for, right?
Right.
I didn't have anything waiting for me at home. I obviously didn't, I wanted to live, but there wasn't that, oh, I'm going to leave my kids fatherless and my wife husbandless. That wasn't ever in my mind, like probably you carried along with you the whole time. So a little different.
Yeah, no, that's a great observation. Since leaving the Army, you've had a couple different jobs and careers, but you are building a career as a senior consultant in a construction project management company. How did the journey from combat medic to consultant transpire? Kind of take us through that journey.
Yeah. It was a journey. Listening to the time we're recording this, your podcast with Kuderna has already come out, and I listened to that one, and I was thinking the whole time, I wish I knew what he knew when I was getting out, because it really could have helped me out. I thought I was giving myself a really good opportunity. I started looking for jobs like 3 months before getting out. I was sending my resume everywhere, and any job that seemed like it was in my wheelhouse. I didn't have a degree, but I thought that with my experience in the military, I would be able to grab a, low or middle management job with relative ease, but it's definitely not the case. I got out in 2013. My wife lived in California, so I was applying at like 2 to 3 jobs a day in California, went to multiple interviews, and I finally landed a job 11 months after getting out. So I started 3 months before, didn't get it till 11 months in. So I was searching for a job for 14 months. I finally got my first job as an operations manager. I won't name the company, but it's a very well-known nationwide termite pest control company. And it was a decent job. The hours were really long and the pay was not great, but it did pay the bills. I was there for about a year and a half. And then I kind of had this opportunity to make big money, quote unquote, doing mortgages. So I was like, all right, you know what? I didn't make much money in the military. I'm not making much money now. I'm going to chase the money. Like I felt kind of owed. I was like, yeah, I've done a lot of stuff that for not a lot of money. Now I'm going to go get my money. So I took that job and I was good at it. I was good at talking with my clients. I was honest. I was really good at figuring out like specific structures of mortgages that would best suit them. And, the money didn't really come like I thought it would. And then the company kind of started going downhill. So I jumped ship. My cousin, technically he's a second cousin, but whatever. He got me an interview with a construction company in Riverside, California. And, I got a job as a project engineer, and that was like my first introduction into the construction world. Um, I was not a fan of being a project engineer, though. Those were real long hours. I worked weekends, and I was still living paycheck to paycheck. Um, and then, like after a year and a half of doing that, well, about a year and a half in, at one point they wanted me to sign off on some fraudulent invoices so they could upcharge a client, and that was something that I was not going to do. That's totally against my integrity. And crazy enough, I was gone 2 weeks later. I don't know if those two things are related, but maybe. But then, so after that, I called my cousin Todd, who got me that interview, and I told him what had happened. He felt so bad for put me in that kind of situation. And this kind of is that part about it's all about who you know comes into play. He said, he was like, well, look, man, I'd offer you a job doing what I do, but I think you'd think it's boring. And I was like, well, I was like, man, I've been bored in the Army before, but I remember what made it awesome was I still had good people around me. And I was like, well, if I'm working with Todd, he's a good dude. He's awesome to be around. I was like, I can handle a bored job if I'm working with him. So I was like, all right, well, I'll try your boring job. And, so he hired me, and that was my first job as a consultant. And I love it. It's the best job I've had since leaving the military. Yeah, I can't imagine doing anything else.
Yeah, and you're so good at it. You're so good with people. And it's sad just how frequent your story, my story is, where you have someone who loved what they did, they get out, and it takes several months to find a job, just to find a job, not even a job they love, but just to get their foot in the door and make some scratch to put food on the table and keep the roof over your head. You said
Yeah.
something about being owed or feeling entitled, and I think that's military verbiage we use, and I kind of want to dispel what someone may be thinking. I don't think you felt entitled in a sense that you were owed anything other than a fair opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, thank you for clarifying. Yeah, no, I didn't want a handout. I didn't want I didn't think I deserved anything. My mentality was, man, I've been busting my ass for peanuts. I'm going to chase the money and bust my ass and make a lot of money. So it was all, I think it was more like I owe that to myself to chase the money. And that was a slope that no one should go down, in my opinion, but I did it and I learned from it.
Yeah, and I mean, you don't join the military to get rich. Even senior level officers make just over 100 grand a year, and you're talking general level officers, flag level
Yeah.
officers. They make 100, 110, 120, and they're leading tens of thousands of soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines. Um, you just want to shot the American dream. You served your country, you put your life on the line 3 different times, and you just want a fair shot.
Right.
So, fitness is a huge part of who you are, and maintaining that level of fitness takes discipline. How has that discipline carried over into your personal and professional lives?
Man, I think everybody needs some sort of fitness routine in their lives. And I know people have physical limitations and stuff, but I mean, it can be any shape or form. You can go on a walk, hiking, CrossFit, weightlifting, whatever you can physically do, just do it. And the reason I say that is because no matter how crazy your life is, how unstable things may seem, doing a little workout is something you can control, and you can do it anywhere, you can do it anytime. And it can be that one constant thing in your life that no matter how unstable everything else is, you still have this one thing and it releases endorphins and helps with depression and all that stuff. So it's a multi-factor benefit to you. But I also make my workouts challenging in some way. I do a lot, mainly weightlifting, but 2 or 3 days a week, I'll do CrossFit workouts in my garage. And no matter what kind of workout I'm doing, I always make it challenging to where it's like, I think to myself, like, okay, how can I make this to where I don't want to do it? And even though I consciously know that I'm playing a psychological game with myself, it works. When you can finish something that while you're doing it, you're like, oh, I could probably stop now. I've done enough, or I don't need to do the last rep or the last sets, but you do it anyway. That's the part that carries over into your professional and personal life. Like when you don't want to sit down and study for the exam, you do it anyway because you're like, I don't want to do this, but I know I need to. Or if you don't want to have that tough conversation with your spouse, but I do difficult things all the time. I can have that conversation. So just kind of practicing ignoring negative thoughts and taking the easy road. And you do it in a workout, but it does translate into other aspects of your life.
Absolutely. Sergeant Major of the Army Daily, he said PT may not be the most important thing you do any day, but it's the most important thing you'll do every day. And it's there's a direct correlation between physical fitness and mental health. You mentioned endorphins. You're teaching your body through positive stress how to navigate stress and come out on top, right? If you're whether you're
Absolutely.
running, which I hate, if you're putting a couple 100 pounds on a squat rack or a bench press or whatever, you're teaching your body how to respond to external force.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
what better way to develop resiliency and tenacity and mental toughness in an age where we are inundated with information and a ton of negative external influences? If you're strong in body, you can be strong in mind, and you can navigate those a lot more efficiently.
absolutely. Yeah, like you said, in this day and age, and everybody's always looking for the easy thing, the easy
Right.
way. And look, I'm guilty of it too. Like I use ChatGPT every day to help me look up things faster instead of doing it the old school way. But we we all have our little shortcuts. But yeah, definitely do a fitness routine. Like again, make it. If going on a walk is hard, that's fine. Do a walk. If that's hard, then that's great. You'll get better at it.
Well, and longevity, right? Like depression can't hit a moving target. There's a great reel going around. It's this Asian guy dancing in his barracks room or dorm room, whatever it is. Guy has a smile on his face and he's playing funky music and he's dancing. Like that's a thing. If you're feeling depressed, get up and move. And so many of
Absolutely.
us from the military have been diagnosed with anxiety or depression, and the biggest things you can do is eat right, move your body, and get in the sun and or the water, and you'd be surprised how much of that can get fixed and resolved. And if you're a husband, wife, if you're a parent, you want to be able to physically love those in your life, play with your kids or grandkids, pick up a gallon of milk when you're 70, whatever. Like your body has to be working for that to happen.
Yeah. And like you said, there's no age limit. Just again, and it doesn't have to be one specific thing. Just do anything.
Do anything. Yeah. Like you've seen the trail behind the house. It's the green trail runs all through Scottsdale down to Tempe. Like there are 60, 70, 80-year-old folks out here who put me to shame every morning. I'm out here walking my dogs for a mile and they're zipping by, they're running, they're on scooters, bikes. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great to see that. I love seeing that.
So a lot of veterans struggle with identity after taking off the uniform. What was the toughest part about transition for you, and how did you get past that?
Man, that's a tough question. I think if you enjoyed your service in the military, then I think finding pride in yourself and what you do after getting out is the hardest part. Earlier, I told you the jobs I had once I got out were like, I was living paycheck to paycheck. But the worst part was that I had zero pride in who I was and in what my job was. And, because I went from being the medic that every patrol wanted. If you were on a dangerous mission coming up, my name was the one that
Yeah.
everybody talked about, and not to brag, but I was really well rounded. I had medical knowledge, I had tactical knowledge, and I was physically capable of doing the job. And to go from that to find myself in a job interview sitting across from some dude who's 60 pounds overweight with a loose tie and a wrinkled shirt, and I'm trying to convince him that I'm worthy of being on his team, is soul sucking. And it's kind of funny. I was in the gym the other day, and I had my earbuds and I was listening to my workout mix, and one of my all-time favorite
Wait, was it
songs.
Golden from K-pop Demon Dragons? I'm going up.
Not yet. That one does sneak in though, because my kids are always listening to it on my Spotify. So it leaks
What
into
up,
my
Shar? What
feed.
up, and
Right? No kidding, dude. But yeah, one of my favorite songs that I've heard the song 1,000 times, and I'm in between sets. I'm sitting there and I know all the words to the song because I've sang it in my truck 100 times, but I'm sitting there and I actually start listening to the lyrics of the song. And the song was obviously written by a musician, but this dude was frustrated. He was being pressured by his manager and his label to produce a hit single. They wanted They wanted to sell records. They wanted this and they wanted that. And this dude had already had, a pretty good start to his career. He'd written like 70 something songs before then, but they wanted more. And, they just wanted more from him. And if you don't mind, because this is interesting, because when you listen to the when you just read the lyrics, it sounds so much different than when you hear the song. But I want to share, because it goes into part of this question.
Yeah,
Can I
please
share
do.
some of those lyrics? Okay. I get up in the evening and I ain't got nothing to say. I come home in the morning. I go to bed feeling the same way. I'm nothing but tired. I'm just tired and bored of myself. Hey, baby, I could use a little help. The messages keep getting clearer. The radio's on and I'm moving around my place. I check my look in the mirror. I want to change my clothes, my hair, and my face. I ain't getting nowhere. I'm living in a dump like this. I know there's something happening. I know there's something happening somewhere. I just know that there is. You can't start a fire. You can't start a fire without a spark. So it's Dancing in the Dark by Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah.
Now, that song's written by a musician who's frustrated, right? But if you listen to those words, dude, that could be a song written about any veteran who just got out and they're trying to find where they belong.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of when I got out and I was trying to find where I belong. And I knew, because I knew that I knew I had something to offer a company, but I needed a spark. I needed a push. I needed someone who cared enough, right? Thankfully, that came in the form of my cousin Todd, who gave me the opportunity to work for him. But it was just that I was sitting there listening to the lyrics. I was like, it hit me hard, dude. I was like, man, it sounds so different when you just listen to the lyrics than when you're like singing it, It's crazy.
Yeah, because it's an upbeat song.
Right.
Right. Courtney Cox is on stage dancing. And, for listeners, especially if you were not in the military, or if you are a veteran or still in the military, please share this part with your friends and family who have not served. There's a stereotype about the military that we are, bulls in a china shop, break glass in case of emergency. The military has some of the most philosophical, intrinsic, and artistic minds and souls that you will ever encounter. Right. So you have a guy, my friend Justin, on with us right now, who grew up in a town of 694 people in Texas. And the lyrics to a Bruce Springsteen song touched his soul and resonated with him. It's almost profound, right? Because people think, oh, you're just a trigger puller. You're not just anything. Which brings me to a point I want to say, you honestly mean, you don't mean to brag. It's very hard. It's almost beaten into your head in the military to not brag about yourself. Yet when you leave the military, you have to learn to be confident in who you are and sell yourself to someone else. It's counterintuitive to what you've been taught, whether it's 2, 3, 4 year enlistment or a 25, 30-year career. It's counterintuitive. So, brothers and sisters, if you're listening, it is not being cocky or arrogant to learn how to speak about yourself. As a matter of fact, God created you in his image and his likeness. And when you downplay who you are downplaying our Father in heaven, right? So step into your skin, walk into every room like God sent you there, because he did. And yes, you're going to most likely struggle when you transition out, and you're going to have a hard time landing that dream job. But something that we've learned is this too shall pass, and God's timing, not mine. God's will, not mine.
Yeah, 100%. I like what you said. This too shall pass. That's a similar thing to what I used to when I got out and I was working these crappy jobs. I was also going to school full time because I realized maybe I should get a degree. And I remember going to school online full time, plus having a full time job, plus a kid and a wife can be daunting. And I would get kind of down on myself and be like, man, I don't know if I can finish this degree. And then I would think to myself, hey, how many single moms out there are working 2 jobs and going to school to get their degree? I was like, you know what? It's been done before. And if it's been done before, then I can do it. So, any veteran getting out, it's more than likely you're going to go through those struggles, but just know how many of us have already gone through the struggles and come out the other side. So none of us are any better than anyone else who's about to come out. If we've done it, you can do it too, 100%.
Absolutely. Your experience is unique, but the path has already been there, right? And there should be some solace. Like there are millions of people who've gone before me who have dealt with this transition. They've struggled. Maybe I can do something that I'm told is not okay, which is ask for help. Right? And be careful where you ask for help. There are people who will. Travis Kelsey talked about this when he was in college. His coach was like, Travis, you are a drain on me. I need you to be a fountain. Drains suck the energy, the life, and the will out of people. Fountains pour into others. So when you do ask for help, make sure you're identifying fountains, not drains.
Absolutely.
As I mentioned before, you have just a great sense of humor and an innate ability to bring people together. How has that helped you find your place in civilian life?
Man, I, the, the sense of brotherhood really, that we talked about earlier, really, that you have in the military isn't as common in the civilian sector. So when I've brought that kind of into at least definitely the company I'm working for now, and it's so funny because when they get a glimpse of kind of that cohesion and that brotherhood, they really like it. They're drawn to it. And I have great relationships with my company owners and the higher ups, and it's definitely not from sucking up to them. I bust their balls pretty hard, but they like it because they know it's coming from a place of respect and love, and I think it's somewhat refreshing for them, and that kind of helps them relax a little bit too, because it for anyone in the corporate world, when you're talking to higher up, sometimes people tend to get nervous or think this is the moment, like what if I don't make a good impression? Like some of those guys are just as nervous sometimes talking to you as you are to them for different reasons, obviously. If you go into it lighthearted, not taking yourself too seriously, it'll help them relax a little bit, and then they enjoy talking to you more because they know I can talk to him because I can be relaxed too. I don't have to be the boss. I can be their guy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what, one of the things that veterans bring to the workforce is a duality of man type environment where you've been in some pretty extreme situations. You have clear chain of command, but a good chain of command is going to interact with people. So, they're still human beings and you can disarm people, especially if you're good with people like you. Just being yourself, you allow them to be themselves. And guys, here's and gals, here's a very good lesson. If you want to be thought of as a good conversationalist, shut up and get the other person to talk about themselves. If you ask questions, if you are genuinely interested, it's not, what's your favorite color or crap like that. Ask questions about them. What makes you happy? What are you scared of? What are your dreams, hopes, ambitions? More often than not, we just go through life. What's up? How's it going? What a horrible question. And the
Yeah,
automatic response is I'm good, fine, living the dream. There's no substance to it. Learn how to ask good questions, and we all want to be heard. So
absolutely.
get someone to talk about themselves. Ask them about their spouse, their kids, their family, their hobbies. Once you find one thread you can pull on, oh man, that conversation is going to grow and they're going to feel seen and heard and feel alive.
Yeah. And especially like when if you're a veteran listening to this and you do get out and you do get into the civilian sector, ask those questions to your boss. Like they're not used to getting that. They're used to having to initiate conversation because people may be intimidated to talk with. Do exactly what you just said, Kevin. Talk to them about what's going on in their family. Like, what do they got planned for the weekend? And you'd be shocked at some of the reactions you'll get because they will be probably caught off guard, but they're gonna be excited to talk to you about them instead
Right?
of always having to ask you stuff.
Yeah. It's almost more difficult because the higher up you go, the further removed you are So as a leader, executive manager, director, whatever, the expectation is the boss needs to care about me. Well, who cares about the boss? Right? So we got to catch up over Labor Day, which was just awesome. I got to see a sheepdog mom and dad in action. You guys are very protective about what your children are exposed to. And it was obvious there was a foundation of faith behind that. Then, after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, which affected both of us deeply, you sent me a text and you said you were putting together a Sunday morning church program for your family. You're going to lead it and you're going to start with the book of Mark. Now, I have to applaud you here and tell you how proud of you I am for leading your house. Joshua 24:15 says, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." What was your inspiration? What caused you to do this?
Well, I mean, like you said, that the whole thing with Charlie Kirk was that was the tipping point, I'll say. It, again, huge, deeply effective, like affecting thing that happened to a lot of the country. But more than that, I grew up in church my whole life. But as I gotten older and kind of more versed in the the nature of mankind, I kind of started distancing myself from church, not God, but physical church, because I've seen man and pastors manipulate the word of God to kind of fit whatever narrative they're pushing. I've even seen pastors make their patrons feel guilty for not tithing enough, which is 100% a racket by the church, because Jesus never said, give money to your church. He specifically stated on multiple occasions, for example, Matthew 6:1-4, he says, when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. So giving in secret, your Father will reward you. Matthew 19:21, um, you know, sell all your possessions to the poor and then come follow me. In Matthew, he also urges you not to store up treasures in heaven, or not in earth, but in heaven. In giving money to the church didn't even come up until later in the New Testament, when churches started becoming a thing. While Jesus was around, he was poor. He didn't ask for anybody's money. So I think God appreciates tithing at the heart, where God has no use for your money. The church wants your money. God doesn't want your money. God would rather you be out finding someone who's in real need, give them some money and clothes and or whatever they need, and say, look, the Lord has put on my heart to give you this. So, to answer the question, I guess, is I started because I wanted to have my children not have a manipulated word of God. I wanted them to get literally what the Bible says. No, this is what I think he was saying, or anything like that. And I just wanted to be a more true form of a relationship with God. And they can carry that with them or leave it behind. But I wanted to at least give them the opportunity to, have that with them.
Yeah, I love that. And good churches can explain tithing really well. The church I go to here in Arizona and the one I went to in Michigan do a good job of explaining tithing. And most people think it talks about your finances. And what they were able to teach us is, if you tithe from your earnings, you're entrusting your finances to God, which I agree makes sense. But a quick synopsis of tithing can be your time, talent, and treasures, right?
Yeah.
I don't remember what verse that specifically comes from. I think it's in Matthew chapter 25. But God has given us all some treasures of time, talents, and treasures, and He wants us to turn a spiritual profit on all of it. So, for those of us that may still struggle a bit financially, okay, you can seek one of the other two avenues: your talents and your time. So,
Yeah.
volunteering for organizations that you align with your goals are great. If you have talents, if you're a speaker, a writer, a musician, if you are good at carpentry, whatever, if you have a skill and you can use it to help somebody else, that's another way to tithe. The reason.
Yeah. And
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, and do that and make sure, you say, hey, this is, the Lord's put on my heart to do this for you. Or, And that's where the tithing comes from is I'm doing this, but I'm doing it in the name of God, or whatever your religion is, but do that and give the glory credit to him.
100%. And the reason why I was so impressed with what you're doing with your Sunday morning church program for your family is it reminded me of one of my favorite movies, which is the movie Courageous, by the Kendrick brothers. They're a Christian studio. They've done Fireproof, Courageous, War Room, Overcomer. Um, they're fantastic. And I'm not sponsored. This is just me talking about stuff I like. But in the movie Courageous, they're police officers, and a tragedy happens to one of the families, and he steps forward, and it's a powerful scene. And he says, "Where are you, men of God? The question in my house has already been answered. Who will lead my family? I will." And I just see you stepping into that role. And as my friend, my brother, and my brother in Christ, like, it just makes my heart so proud to see you doing that, because you're setting an example for your wife, your kids, and for the other people in your sphere of influence.
Thanks, man. Appreciate
Yeah.
that, dude.
Um, so when you think about legacy now, what does that mean to you? What kind of impact do you want to leave on your family, your friends, the world, the people you lead?
It's funny because again, when I was listening to your podcast with Cooter now, he said something to the effect that he always thought that I think his uniform was his legacy, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I am no different, because I think, again, when you take such pride in that and it means so much to you, I always expected that to be my legacy. And then, now that I've separated a little bit from that, I it'll always remain with me, and it'll always be a chapter in my life, and a significant chapter. I want my legacy to be my relationships with my daughters, with my amazing wife, with my great friends, you and the other horsemen, and that's honestly where I put all of my wealth now is in those. I've, you know, maybe it's just getting older. Maybe it's just knowing myself more. Just, I don't know what it is, but that's where, I want my legacy to be, is in my people.
I love that. So when you look back
Yeah.
on your journey, most of our listeners are going to be veterans. But what's one message you would want to share with another veteran, or anyone who is struggling with their identity, with their purpose, with reconnecting or connecting with people? What's one message you want to share with them?
Yeah. Something I tell my daughters this a lot when they're going through, my daughters are 11 and 6. And it just last weekend, I said the same thing to my youngest daughter, because she's 6. My older daughter's 11, and my older daughter had a friend over, and they're quite a bit older than the 6-year-old, so it's kind of hard for the 6-year-old to do all the stuff that the 11-year-old does. And she was crying, and she was like, they don't they don't want me to be part of this thing that they're doing, and I'm sad because I don't have any friends. I never have sleepovers, this, that, and the other. And I told her, I was like, listen, the feeling you're feeling now is something that everybody in the world has felt. Like, you're not alone in what you're feeling right now. You're 6 years old. You're going to have friends someday. That time will come. But just right now, being 6 years old, you just don't have sleepovers yet. That's just not usually what 6-year-olds do. But it's the same message that I would say to any veteran getting out, or anyone, honestly, who's going through a rough patch, is that, as tough as it may seem, there have been so many people, millions of people, that have gone through what you're going through, and they've come out the other side. If they can do it, you can do it too. Sometimes you just gotta, sometimes time helps. Sometimes talking to a therapist, or talking to a friend or a family, but it will pass in time.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for being on, guys. Like, this is what the Invisible Veteran's about. It's about sharing our experiences, positive and negative, lighting the way for those that are about to come after us, because this didn't exist for a long time. If you go back to World War One, World War Two, it was just like, okay, you're reintegrated back to society. Korea, the forgotten war. Vietnam, they were disgraced and spit upon and just treated horribly. Desert Storm, a lot better, but there was no afterthought, no thought of caring once you take off the uniform. And then the global war on terror is 20 years going. And there's a bunch of us that are getting out and like, hey, man, this was rough. How can we improve our foxhole? How can we help those after us? And Justin, you provided some wonderful examples on things you've learned and some great nuggets to pass on to listeners. So thank you so much for your time. I know you're traveling. I know you're busy. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. And I can't wait to see you again soon, brother. I love you.
Yeah, I love you too. And I love what you're doing here. I'm so excited to see the future of this podcast, your book, everything that you have going on. I am one of your biggest fans, if not your biggest fan, dude. I cannot wait.
Thank you. Justin, my guy, thank you for showing up today with such honesty and conviction. Conversations like this remind us that strength isn't about what we carry alone, it's about the courage to share the load. Your story, your faith, your disciplines are going to resonate with a lot of people who are listening. And if you're listening right now and you're struggling, or you know someone who is, hear me. You are not alone. Reach out to someone you trust, find a fountain, call 988. Your story is not finished yet, and the world is better with you in it. Thank you for listening to the Enduring Mindset podcast. If this episode spoke to you, share it with a friend, family member, or colleague who might need it. And make sure to follow us on Instagram, Threads, and X at enduring_mindset_enterprise. Until next time, onward, forward, fall out.